Eric, there's so many risks that we face in retirement, and I know that you've put this list together. You didn't actually put it together.
With some help of some certified financial planners.
Right, that's right. And amazingly, and we're not saying this is exhaustive, but it would appear exhaustive, 28 reasons, 28 ways that retirees are at risk.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's any way we can actually get through this in one session. So let's call this part one.
Part one.
Hopefully we'll get it done in part two. But folks, these are important. We'll go through these one at a time. Annuities do not answer or solve each one of these.
Not all of them.
But there are several that an annuity can really
impact and impact. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, there's at least 11 of them by my count that are basically annuities have the ability to negate or assist with, and there's even a few more that there are options that you can add to annuity that would help take care of some of these things.
Well, let's start off with number one here, Eric. Longevity risk.
Okay, and longevity risk is the first and foremost one that annuities take care of, because when you purchase an annuity, you're looking for lifetime income typically.
So when we talk about longevity risk, we're talking about living too long.
Yeah, living longer than you planned. Oops annuity. Oops, I'm still here.
You had enough money if you just would have died on time.
Right, yeah. So that number one risk, that longevity risk, is really the one that fits hand in glove with annuities, because you don't have to worry about outliving your money.
Right. Which can be accomplished through immediate annuities, hybrid annuities, even a variable annuity can be annuitized.
Yeah.
So really virtually any form of annuity can solve longevity risk if you have enough money and you've positioned it in the right way.
Sure.
And we would contend that this is like a pension plan.
Exactly. Your self-directed pension, basically.
Right.
So, all right, should we move on to number two?
Let's go.
Okay. Excessive withdrawal risk, also known as portfolio failure risk.
Can you say that?
No,
again?
I have to read that.
Portfolio.
Portfolio risk.
Failure risk. Okay. So what we're really talking about here is actually not having enough money for the amount of money that you're pulling out.
It's very similar to longevity risk in the sense of you think, hey, you put yourself on the clock, you have 5 years worth of income.
I've got $500,000, Eric.
I can spend. Yeah. And you're just basically outspending what you've saved.
Right.
Your expectations.
So you really don't have a plan. You're just spending because you feel like you've got quite a bit of money.
Right.
And so that's, there's some other things we need to talk about on that, but I think we're coming up to that in a little bit. Now, we look at number 3 here. This is one that I think everyone is concerned about in general terms, and that is inflation risk.
Yeah.
Losing our purchasing power. And let's talk about that and how annuities might make a difference.
Well, obviously there are ways to structure annuities to give yourself an increasing income. Some of them have a staged series where you can take a 3% increasing income throughout your life.
Right.
Others have options to tie it to an index, and there's even options now to tie it to the CPI or a version of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So those are ways to help guard against inflation with an annuity.
Right.
But
so let's just say maybe in a simplified way, when it comes to using annuities for inflation, that there's probably a couple of variations. One is an immediate annuity that will give you, or annuitization of a deferred annuity, that will allow you to have some type of a guaranteed increasing income. Or there is another way to offset inflation, and that is you don't need the income now, so you can defer it, and you can get a very high roll-up rate, maybe in the 7% range, that will allow your money to grow for future income needs.
Yeah, we call it laddering, is basically laddering annuities so that you're saving some out there. You may hope you never actually have to turn them on, but they're there in case the cost of living grows so much that you've outlived your income.
Yes.
So you need more. So.
Right.
So.
Okay, long-term care.
Oh, well, it's only number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah. So, a long-term care risk. I mean, none of us want to think about losing, the kind of the physical.
Sure. Going into an institution.
Right.
Or,
and we talk about the activities of daily living. being able to button your shirt, being able to do the small things.
Right.
There are things that if you all of a sudden can't do all those things on your own, how do you adapt so that your ability to live and bring people, bring
Yes.
those resources in to take care of that situation, so you can still have a comfortable,
Well, and I've seen these situations with clients where, I mean, the first thing we think of is being institutionalized. Nobody wants to be institutionalized, and yet, so many times that's not even the bigger concern. Sometimes it's just home health care.
Right.
How do we get someone to come into our home and be able to afford them? Because that can actually be sometimes more cost prohibitive because it's 24/7 care in your home. Sometimes,
yeah.
or it could just be a supplement.
Right.
You're right.
Right.
You're right.
But it's paying for that resource. Did you
Right.
anticipate having to take care of that need?
And long-term care with annuities, there are different ways that we can provide some long-term care benefit, supplement, or even, maybe even a full long-term care plan with an
Right.
annuity.
Right. So there are pieces, riders typically that you can utilize an annuity to, to basically make those kind of contingency plans if
Right.
you need them.
Right.
So, but it's, that's one of those risks that's out there
Yes.
that really needs to be addressed quite often.
Right. Right.
So the next one, incapacity risk. Now, it sounds really deadly when you, but it's and I have a family of history of Alzheimer's, so it's the mental,
Right.
losing that physical, the ability to make the decision.
Right.
Right. We don't say that the annuity takes care, and
No.
annuity takes care of this, but
No.
what happens if you can't make those financial decisions
You have
yourself?
to have planned in advance, because if you can't make the decision, a decision's going to be made for you, and it may not be the person you want making it or the decisions you want made. So
Exactly.
a little advanced planning can make a big difference.
Right. So the financial matters. It's not having the physical, mental capacity to take care of your own financial matters.
Healthcare, number 6,
Yeah.
healthcare expense.
And I think this is becoming more and more an issue that's coming to the forefront with everything that's going on.
Right.
It's what's medical insurance going to cost?
Right.
How much are we going to have to expend out of our pockets,
Right.
especially as an aging community?
Yes. And this is one of the things that I have frequently discussed with clients, and that is that they will inevitably say, I'm going to need more money in the beginning because I'm going to be traveling and I'm going to be doing this, that, and the other thing. So as I age, I won't need as much.
Yeah.
But what they're not counting into it many times is the cost of health care.
Right.
And that's the wild card. There's more and more things that are becoming electives that you have to pay for out of your pocket. So if you want a high quality of life, you're going to pay for some of these things yourself in the future.
Yeah, you don't think about, you may be on an 80-20 plan, which seems like a great thing. Well, all of a sudden your portion of that 20% is getting to be a lot more expensive as you age. So.
Right. So I think that healthcare expense is a big risk that retirees face.
Yes. So our next one here is investment risk, which is obviously if you've got money in the markets, the risk there of losing money in the financial markets. So a lot of people will put a portion of their money out there, still leave it in the equities.
Right.
Well, and there's a chance that the market's going to go up and the market's going to go down.
Right.
So.
Well, in a very general sense, Eric, the way that we like to discuss this with our clients in general is if you have discretionary income, money that you can afford to lose, then you may want to have it in the market or some in the market. But when it comes to that portion of your money that you want it to be secure and safe, annuities can be very effective in this area.
And we talk about foundational income, protecting, having you're covering your basic needs and basic necessities with that foundational level of income.
Right.
Stuff that's in the market, you don't have the time sometimes to recover.
Yes.
It's a risk-reward aspect. You have to realize those are higher risk, higher reward settings.
Right.
You may not have the ability to recover as a retiree.
Yeah, these next couple here, Eric, number 8 and number 9, are somewhat tied into the same risk area. One is asset allocation risk, having inadequate diversification.
Yeah, and when we talk about asset allocation, usually most people in the equities think small cap, large cap, bonds, exposure. There are really more safe money positions in addition to that, but it's allocating across multiple places, and
Right.
making sure that you're not having all your eggs in one basket to simplify.
Right,
it,
right.
You don't use that silver bullet. It may work very
Right,
effectively
right.
for a big growth, but then all of a sudden it comes crashing down.
Right.
So
And, when we look at annuities, there's a lot of talk about non-market correlated assets.
Right.
And annuities are very much non-market correlated. So, and you've also got an additional level of security and protection, because annuities are basically secured many times with very high-grade investments and bonds, even government treasuries. So you've got the claims-paying ability of the insurance company actually even guaranteeing another level above those bonds, which you don't have if you buy the bonds directly.
And here we're talking about fixed annuities.
Fixed annuities, right.
We should always be
Right.
the caveat there. If you're in
Yeah.
a variable annuity, you're going to
have the investment risk.
exactly
Right.
So
Right.
and then market risk, which is of course
Stocks fall.
it's events that we're looking
Right.
at things right now. You look at what's going on in Europe.
Yes.
It's causing our market to fluctuate both
Right.
up and down.
A lot of things that are out of our control.
Exactly.
And this sequence of returns risk, this kind of ties back into one of the earlier ones that we had talked about, and that was excess withdrawal risk, and that's when you're taking. Go ahead.
But it is tied into the market as well.
Yes, it
is.
is.
We talk about dollar cost averaging.
Right.
Well, this is the reverse of that. When you're
Yes.
you're putting in, you're going to buy more at the low times than at the
Mm-hmm.
high. Well, the same happens when you're pulling out. You're going to,
Right.
by odds, you're going to pull out more at the low times. Well, you're reducing your principal more quickly then.
Right.
And so
Right.
it's that sequence of returns. If you actually get negative returns
Mm-hmm.
while you're pulling money out, you don't get the advantage of compounding.
Yes.
So it really does become a much bigger impact when you're using equities
Right.
as that safe storage place for your retirement plan.
Right.
And so you have to be careful about sequence of it, and you can't control it.
You cannot control it, and there's unfortunately long periods of time where the market does go in a negative or a flat position, and you can really get yourself in a bad situation, especially when you're in or near retirement. When you've got a lot of time ahead of you,
Right.
and you can wait things out. It's completely different than when you're in retirement and you're very vulnerable.
Right. The next one's kind of an interesting aspect, and it's reinvestment risk.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a lot of it lately, especially with the people we're talking to. And it's basically when your investments mature,
Like CDs.
like CDs right now. I don't know how many people I've talked to that said, "Hey, my CD was at 5%.
Yeah.
It's coming up due," and they're offering me 0.8% for
Right.
5 years.
They're in
So,
shock.
yeah. So
It's-
so you thought you were getting a good deal when you did it, which, and by
You
today's
did,
standards,
you
you
did,
did.
you did,
And
yeah.
then all of a sudden, it's at maturity. Well, if you were living off that interest, that 5%, you were just pulling
Right.
that interest to
Right.
live off. Now it's matured. What do you do?
Well, and this is where an annuity, properly positioned, the right strategy, could even be a pre-issued annuity with a high yield. So there's a lot of things that annuities can solve in this area, especially when there's really no yield to be found in the banking instruments.
Right. Yeah. You usually think of things. You always hope that they're going to be higher when you come out. In this case, what happens if they're lower? So.
This number 12 here, forced retirement risk. Now, we do run into this
Yeah,
quite
we
a bit,
do.
where someone maybe is relying on a younger spouse that's working, or maybe the two of them are healthy and they believe that they have this many more years to work, and then they're forced into retirement.
Right. Well, and it could be, their own doing. Could be the business's
Right.
doing. Something happens to them. That they have poor health. One of them gets injured on the job.
Right.
All of a sudden, having 15 more years of anticipated work turns into 2
Yes.
or 0, and now you don't have that income or that level of income to
Right.
to basically continue planning or preparing for retirement.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's become a lot more prevalent with how companies are kind of moving and
Right.
downsizing.
Well, and this is where, with the flexibility of a deferred annuity, you can actually have your money earning and preparing for that day,
Right.
even though you don't know what day that's going to be. And there's enough flexibility, if it's set up right, that you can turn that income on when it's needed.
Yeah.
So,
The business continuity risk is really kind of what I was alluding to.
Yes.
In that, what if the business closes? What if you
Right.
you work for a small business? It doesn't have to be a small business. Like you
Yes.
look at what just happened with GM. We were on
Oh,
the
yeah,
verge
yeah.
of hundreds of thousands
Right.
of people being out of work.
And
so.
and then there's been is it Ford or GM that's just recently done the
Well, they both did the pension.
yeah, the pension
change.
changes, right?
Right.
And they force people into choosing new options and you know,
Yeah.
foregoing what they thought they had.
Right. So you think you've got your retirement taken care of, and in this case, it's still stable. But
Right.
But your options change. How they're
Yeah.
funding it changes.
Yeah.
What you expect to happen.
Yeah.
You know, from the business being able to fund your retirement.
Right. Yeah. Hey, Eric, we're kind of about halfway through here. Maybe we'll call this our part one, but let's take on number 14. I think this is a big deal.
Yes, it is.
I think we're in a lot of flux right now, and that's public policy change risk.
Yeah. What do you do if the government changes the rules on you?
Right.
Or, you know, basically, it could be the
Or-
insurance companies, I guess, too. But in this case, we're usually talking
The government.
The government.
Right.
Yeah.
Or forcing insurance company rules, you know, to change.
Right.
So I mean, right now we've got our healthcare,
Healthcare, Social Security is in flux.
Medicare,
Medicare.
state Medicaid programs.
That's right.
And then, you know, just all of the tax, which I think we're going to get to that in part two,
Yeah.
but all of the public stands that are being taken in, you know, what's going to be taxed, what isn't going to be taxed, how investments are going to be handled, capital gains, how insurance will be treated,
Exactly.
Roths,
I mean-
everything's on the line.
I mean, here in Illinois, we're having issues with, you know, public employees. Their pensions are basically going to go away.
Right,
And
right.
that's the threat
Right.
anywhere of what's going on here.
Exactly.
So
and throughout the United States to various degrees.
exactly. So what happens, you know, if a public institution changes the rules on how things have to happen? So,
Right. So again, all we can work with is what we have in the present, and know that in many instances, especially, you know, going back, those that have entered into something in good faith, such as you know, certain life insurance policies and that type of thing that had tax benefits, they typically were grandfathered in, and then those new ones trying to get in were you know, disallowed.
Right.
So-
You have to plan based off the rules for today.
Yeah.
And you hope that the game doesn't change.
Yeah, yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
yeah.
Folks, this has been more of a little bit of a serious time of reflecting on the various risks that retirees face. These are very real risks, and Eric and I deal with these on a regular basis with our clients, and so we really wanted to take this in kind of a serious sense and take our time on them to some degree. So these first 14, call it part one.
Yep. I think that's probably this is probably a good stopping point. But we'll continue to go through this list next week.
Yes.
And
Talk about them individually, and
because these are things that I think as you're planning your retirement, these are questions you have to ask.
right.
Ask yourself. I mean, hopefully your financial advisor that you're working with is asking you these questions as well. But you know, you have to have a plan, or at least an ability to say, what are we going to do if this happens?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's a good strategy for us to kind of go through all these pieces, lay them out there for you, and give you some options to kind of prepare your own answers.
Right, right. Very important exercise. So thank you for taking your time with us, and look for us next week, and we'll go over some other details on risk to retirees.
That's right. 14 more coming next week.